Peace be upon you. I'm Qadi Tayyib, and this is Qur'anomics. This is part 19 from Islam of the Quran to Islam of the Hadith, Imam Al-Shafi'i, the true founder of tradition Sunni Islam religion. Title, The Consensus of the Sunnahs. Thus, Al-Shafi'i has decided the collective Sunnah. This is a serious confiscation of results. The language, whether Arabic or not, broad or narrow, many or few words, is always a product of the group that it speaks. As for the Sunnah, it is originally the Sunnah of the Messenger, singular and individual, or so it is assumed at least. But with a Shafi'i's determination of the principle of the collectiveness of the Sunnah by analogy with the collectiveness of the language. The Sunnah of the Messenger is no longer what was issued by the Messenger in person and in his time, but rather everything that the genealogists attributed to him, and what accumulated in his dictionary is like the accumulation of the dictionary of the language in tandem with the separation of generations and cities. So basically, as time passed, the Sunnah kept on accumulating way over what is possible that the Prophet could have done. And Al Shafi'i states that if a trusted person speaks of another trusted person until it ends with the messenger of God, then it is proven from the messenger of God. Perhaps Al Shafi'i is ignoring himself with all the attributional mechanism that control the collective industry of the Sunnah attributed to the messenger. It is not an ascending and forward looking mechanism, but rather a descending and regressive mechanism. It is not a mechanism that begins with the messenger and ends with trust from trust, but rather a mechanism that begins with trust. So, trust that ends with the messenger. So, basically, the Quran goes from top to bottom, and the Hadith goes from bottom back to up. That's the whole. Why wouldn't the Hadith be from top to bottom? Just like the Quran speak to us over time from top to bottom, but the Hadith is always in reverse. That's an issue. Hence, the susceptibility of the Hadith code to infinite inflation. Whenever a new trust occurs from an old trust, a new Hadith is added to the Hadith code, or at least a new detail. Thus, the Hadith code remained open to accumulation until after Qarn as-Sahah, the third Hijri, and plenty adding to it or recompiling it until the 8th century after Hijrah. And if we return to the similarity of a Shafi'i between the Sunnah and the language, we should note that Arabic, despite its collective origin, is provided for its starting by Al-Ain. The book is called The Ain by Al-Khalil bin Ahmad. He died in 173 after Hijrah, who counts it and collects its vocabulary and expressions. While the Sunnah, and we're talking about the language, but the Sunnah, despite its individual origin, remained open to increase and accumulation and therefore uncountable. Until the Hadith transmitted on the tongue of the Messenger reached more than 700,000 Hadiths that they did not count. Now, 700,000 Hadiths that are unofficial Hadith that did not count. These were fabricated because there was a whole market for this out there. And what all the Imams and wrote down, maximum each one wrote about 5,000, 4,000, or 6,000. And it increased with the passage of time. Rather, this pathological inflation is what created the need to invent an antidote for it, to stop it. And it was a purification of the topics and the support of the false hadith from the 6th century onward. It is not difficult for us to establish a casual link between a Shafi'i exaggeration of the circle of the Sunnah that extends in time and space and its curtailment of the circle of reason. whenever the network of the Sunnah expands so that no calamity that occurs or may occur escapes from its eyes. The role of the mind is no longer in the role of the mind except to catch the crumbs that may escape these eyes that are not Sunnah, despite everything anticipated. Everything in life became tied to the Sunnah. So we see almost towards the end how Al-Shafi'i built everything from nothing until he controls the lives of everybody. From the twisting the meanings of the words to fragmentation of the verses to bring a cutting down on the required persons to authorize to narrate a hadith down to the qualification to uh, accepting hadith from trusted person, from suspicious persons, from people of magazi storytellers, from and compare the sunnah, the sunnah to the Quran even more than it, and comparing what the sunnah is to the other prophets is just it's a whole lot of steps that the Shafi'i went through. But once you start getting the idea, you will realize what the how the Shafi'i worked. So now I am Qadi Tayyib. We're gonna be this is the end of part 19. We're gonna be in part 20. So I'm Qadi Tayyib. This is Quranomics. We will see you in part 20. Thank you.